I'm happy to introduce Gail Baker, who will be giving us a presentation on supporting transition to university, the development of an online orientation and transition program for away from base Indigenous Bachelor of Midwifery students. I'm sure this will be very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on whose land we meet here today. So I'm presenting on behalf of a team of people who are in this room, but I'd like to start by telling you a little bit of a background on our program and what's involved. So in about 2009, our school was approached by four fairly high-powered midwifery experts, three of them from the Northern Territory. One was the director of Alukra, which is an Indigenous clinic for women in Alice Springs. The other one was the manager of Wangari Clinic, which is a clinic for Indigenous women in Darwin. And the other one was a lady who was at the time the midwifery advisor to the Minister for Health in the Northern Territory. And they approached us and asked us if we would be interested in starting a program, a Bachelor of Midwifery program for Indigenous women to become midwives. And they already had a few students in mind, or potential students in mind for us, and these were a couple of Indigenous healthcare workers and other Indigenous women who'd expressed some interest. So, as I'm sure you all know, maternal and infant mortality amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people is 2 to 3 times higher than it is for non-Indigenous people. And so it is a maternal health key priority for the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Plan for 2013-2023. So we decided to take this on board and to try and get it up and running, and it is a key strategy towards closing the gap in these inequalities in health outcomes, to produce extra midwives that can then go and work in their communities and improve outcomes. So, as I said, we started with 5 students from the Northern Territory, but word of the success of our program has obviously spread, and we now have students from just about all over Australia. It's not showing there, but we do have a student in Karratha in Western Australia. We've got Perth. We've also got Boigu Island, which is in the Torres Strait. The only area I don't think we've got anyone yet is South Australia, although we do use hospitals in South Australia to send our students on prac. So for these students who come in, they obviously have to do this by mixed mode. So they come onto campus 4 times a year for 1 week at a time. So they're there at the beginning of every semester and for a week at the end of every semester. And then when they go home to their communities, they study via distance education online with web rooms and teleconferences and so forth. They also do the clinical component of their course in their home communities. So with those really remote areas, there are, of course, challenges, and it became clear fairly early in the program that one of the biggest challenges was progressing students in a timely manner and keeping them in the course. It was acknowledged that these students face obstacles that on-campus students don't. It was noted that when on campus, these students were motivated, they were engaged, they were excited, and they were very positive about their progression in the course. But when they return home, the pressure and the commitments of family and work and community really did impact on their ability to stay involved, and also feelings of isolation, and it disconnected them from the uni and from us as lecturers and the ones that were going to support them, and also from other students. So they did disengage and they then fell behind. And we did, for that reason, have a fairly high attrition rate, and these students were failing more subjects than other students. And then another really significant issue that probably was underestimated in the early years of the Away From Base program is the importance of relationships for Indigenous students. And for them to better engage with us, we really needed to build a relationship with them that was built on trust and integrity. So to address these issues, a suite of strategies were designed to enhance support and learning and engagement. So in about 2013, we formed a team, and the team's all here today. I think, well, most of us are here today. And we started with a brainstorming exercise, and we sat down and tried to address what our problems were, and also some ways that we might be able to support the students better. And so we came up firstly with the idea of a student learning community. And the student learning community is a student-centred, culturally inclusive, and it's an online learning platform. And all of the resources within this community and other online programs that we've developed for them have been developed in response to the student needs and to the challenges, and they were designed to directly target student engagement, student experience and retention, and timely course progression. To make sure that it was culturally inclusive, we did meet with the students, so we got input from our students, we got input from Wimala, which is our on-campus Indigenous support unit, and we also met with community elders for their input. Along the way, other things were developed and produced as well. So what we did firstly to make this very culturally appropriate, we appointed a Indigenous midwifery academic. We also organised, another thing we did was we organised with the Mater Hospital in Brisbane to take our students, the Indigenous students, when they were on campus for a week's clinical placement. So when they're working out in their communities, they're not always exposed to complex maternity care or to special care nurseries. So they actually do a week's placement they can do it 4 times a year at the Mater. We also developed a midwifery education resource kit. So this is a fantastic little duffel bag that in it has a pelvis and a doll and other bits of female anatomy and some books that the students use. And it's a resource that we provided to the facilitators and educators who are in the hospitals where our students do prac in remote areas. We also, for those educators, started a virtual staff room. And so it's on Leo, and it's just for our facilitators in rural and remote areas where they can go on. There's a frequently asked questions box. There's lots of resources, access to journal articles and so forth, and that's just for the facilitators. I think that's it. So you can just see the very edge of her, but this is Michelle Koziak. She's our Indigenous academic, and she's there doing a little class for the students. So besides being the academic and teaching into the unit, into the course, Michelle's also a strong advocate for the students, and being Indigenous, she's often the first person that the students go to, the first port of call. And in some of the feedback, students made comments like, Michelle's always got our back. So they do feel that she can go to them, that they can go to her. And Michelle's also, I guess, the go-between sometimes for students if they're not feeling very comfortable in coming to other people. She will advocate and be the go-between. So what she's doing there is running some sort of a class. So we run 6 webinars a week for the students. Now some of them address specific unit content, so there's specific tutorials. Some of them are also just drop-in sessions where Michelle will just sit there and wait for students to call in, and they can ask specific questions if they want to, or get guidance with assessment pieces, or have things clarified. And there's also space on this learning community for yarning, so that students can just ring in, chat or dial in and chat to Michelle and chat to one another, which gives them a lot of support. And it's in a culturally safe environment, in that Michelle's the only one that really accesses this. The rest of us don't. So they do feel that it's safe and that they can air their grievances if necessary. So Because it is an online package, students tend to engage really well with it. So it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they actually can fit it around family and work and other such things. And it's received really positive feedback from the students and from other stakeholders. To make it more student-friendly, I suppose, and culturally appealing, we sought permission and were given permission to use some of elements of Wimala's artwork. So you can see there the green piece of art in the middle where all the hands are, and the dots and the nodes represent the connection to the earth and to community for the students, and in particular to the ACU community. So the other thing we started was an orientation and a transition program. So we were sort of recognising that students weren't coming into the course well prepared for university. So they came from really diverse educational backgrounds, and a lot of them lacked a lot of confidence starting tertiary studies. So we decided to set up an orientation program specifically for them that gave them a lot of support before they actually arrived, and then a transition program to keep them going. And again, to make sure that it was culturally appropriate, we did get some input from elders and Wimala and our students as well. So is that very clear up there? Because, yeah. I need new glasses, so it doesn't look very clear to me here. So this was the development process. So in 2015, very early in the piece, as I said, we got together and we started brainstorming and developing these ideas. And then we had, I'm going to have to stand, sorry, I can't read on the screen. And then we did up a storyboard, and so each of us, we came up with main headings, and then each of us thought about what we really needed under those headings. So for example, preparing to study, what did the students need to know about that? So they needed to know how to access things on our website and a whole range of things. And then we actually began building the program in August of 2015, and so what we've done is, as we've gone along, we've reviewed it. So we've implemented some of it, we've had it reviewed, we've had consultation, and eventually we got to go live with it. And I'll talk in a minute about the feedback. But it was a long, it wasn't a long, it was a short process, but it was very structured all the way. So we'd build, we'd consult, we'd review, we'd build, we'd consult, we'd review. So we were always modifying it to make sure that it was inclusive of everyone's needs. This is one of those little nodes that I was talking about in the artwork up there, that little green circle with the blue middle. And this is what the Preparing to Study page looks like. So each of those little boxes, I'll show you how it works in a minute. So each of those little boxes, they can click on and it will lead them to further resources. So what to expect from the course, for example, things to bookmark, where to go for help, how to get around the university, so there's all the key areas and maps and all sorts of things for them. There's also a really useful page called Some Tips for Your First Residential, and it's actually got tips from other students. So that's one of our that's a cohort of our students. So in there I can see 3 of our graduates, and the rest are current students. And the current students really enjoy hearing from the experiences of other students, especially our graduates. It's quite motivating for them. Getting through your first semester is designed to give them support when they need it. So, they'll be going along really nicely, and then they go home and then they fall in a bit of a heap sometimes. And so it's meant to be a bit inspirational for them. And one of those tags is called, week 7 is I Need Inspiration. So it's when they are starting to feel a little bit isolated again and in need of encouragement. So these are 2 of our graduates. Charisse is there and Bonnie, and I'll show you Bonnie's story next. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of a preview. of this, and hopefully it will work. It says, and this is from one of our final year students who said, ACU has developed an outstanding program. One of the things I like is the high expectations from our lecturers, their support and encouragement from our sisters. A network of midwives who are passionate to make a change for our mob gives me hope for the future. So I think that's really good. And then this is a really great one, I think. It's from a midwife at the clinical placement organiser at the Royal Melbourne Hospital for Women, and she's talking about one of our students and who actually did prac there. And this particular student did prac at Melbourne and at Lyle McEwen Hospital in Adelaide, and she's from Alice Springs. And when she graduated, she was offered 3 graduate positions. She was offered the Royal Melbourne, Lyle McEwen and Alice Springs. She chose to go to Melbourne, even though she was really nervous about leaving her community and she was really homesick, but she wanted to get the experience so that she could go back to her home community as a more rounded midwife. And so this person has written, she became a well-valued and respected member of our team, and was well known for her friendly, positive and woman-centred practice with women's patients and their families. She was well respected for her clinical skills and knowledge and natural ability as a leader and a champion in cultural safety. She demonstrated a beautiful capacity to work with a diverse range of staff and communicate across people's beliefs and cultural understandings. She went on to champion in mentoring other Aboriginal women in the experience of working in the health sector and provide support to many ACU Aboriginal midwifery students. In 2016, the Women's employed a second ACU away from base midwifery graduate, who is also an excellent graduate and midwife. So I think we got it right. I think we're doing really well. That's great feedback. And just in terms of how it's been received, graduates from rural and remote areas have evaluated and tested the modules prior to its release. As I said, feedback on the content has been really positive, and all commencing students accessed the orientation module this year, which is fantastic, and 72% of them accessed the week 1 transition module. To evaluate this in an ongoing way, at the end of the first semester it will be evaluated. So what happens at the end of each residential, Michelle, the midwifery lecturer, academic, and Paula, our head of school, meet with the students in a little round table discussion, and they get very honest and feedback from those students, and then they also do a small survey to give us feedback. So as I said before, it's ongoing, and we're making changes in relation to the feedback from the students. And I've done that, so that's all of our acknowledgements. So it was funded by the Department of Health. All right, thank you, everybody. We got time for questions? Oh, good. Well, because we've only, they're still fairly new graduates, but they certainly are working in their community. So we've had 9 graduates, which represents about 4% of Indigenous midwives Australia-wide. So those 9 graduates have all now gone back to their own areas. So we've got someone working in Perth. We had a student from Toowoomba, which isn't that far from Brisbane, but she's gone back to Toowoomba to practice. And the graduate in Perth is working in a group practice, but she also worked there as a student. And then we've got graduates in Darwin and Alice Springs, but I have no doubt that when they've got more experience under their belt, they will be working quite remotely, so they'll be making a big difference for their own communities.
Can I just say something? I'd just like to congratulate you, Gail, on a program that is really not only very, very valuable and good practice for Indigenous students, but also for non-Indigenous students. And I think that this particular program could also have a lot of potential for intercultural education. I think just as the undergraduate Indigenous students get so much out of their interactions with postgraduate students, it's the same with non-Indigenous students would get a lot out of their interaction with Indigenous students as well.
Thank you. In our course, we do have a lot of group presentations, and so when we have that type of assessment, the away from base students do that when they come onto campus, and there's not always a lot of local students around, but we always manage to round up a couple so they can come and sit in as the audience and listen to the away from base students. And it is really good that they have that interaction and get to hear what happens, you know, in other communities.
Are there any more questions?
Well, I'll just hand these around. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.